As we jump into a new year of concerns surrounding housing and affordability, Canada continues to grapple with a post-pandemic surge in homelessness. The Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness estimates between 260,000 to 300,000 Canadians experience homelessness in a given year.
In the shadows of Canada's gleaming provinces and picturesque cities, a new crisis is unfolding. It's a concern that has been brewing for years, quietly compounding in the face of rising inequality, skyrocketing costs of living, and a fraying social safety net. And now, as the nation stands on the brink of a new decade, this crisis is poised to explode, with a fury that could leave hundreds of thousands of Canadians without a roof over their heads. This is the face of homelessness in Canada, a scourge that has long been ignored or pushed to the margins of public consciousness, but that is now threatening to engulf entire communities in a tidal wave of human suffering and despair. The estimated number of homeless people in Canada ranges from 260,000 to 300,000, and the figure has been rising. Between 25,000 and 35,000 people are homeless on any given night in Canada. In a survey conducted in 2014, approximately 2.3 million Canadians, representing 8% of the overall population aged 15 and over, reported that at some point in their life, they had to temporarily live with family and friends, in their car or anywhere else because they had nowhere else to live. In 2021, about 235,000 Canadians experienced homelessness, Statistics Canada estimates, a number that experts say is likely to grow due to increasing pressures of rising inflation, massive rent increases, stagnant wages, and a growing influx of refugees seeking asylum from climate disasters and conflict. But by 2030, those numbers could swell to over 500,000 annually and 50,000 to 70,000 on any given night, a tsunami of human misery that could overwhelm already strained social services and plunge countless lives into chaos and despair. But what is driving this looming catastrophe, and why has Canada been so slow to act in the face of such a clear and present danger? The answers are complex and multifaceted, but at their core lie a set of interrelated factors that have been eroding the foundations of Canadian society for decades. In this video, we will unravel the mystery and major driving forces behind the exponential rise of homelessness in Canada and explore the systemic failures that have perpetuated this crisis. From inadequate affordable housing to substance abuse and systemic inequalities, we will shine a light on the root causes that have allowed homelessness to flourish unchecked. Homelessness is a problem that most people would not associate with Canada, yet it is becoming an increasingly pressing issue. According to the Canadian definition of homelessness, homelessness is the situation of any individual, family, or community without stable, safe, permanent, appropriate housing or the immediate means and ability to acquire it. In addition to the visibly homeless, 450,000 to 900,000 Canadians represent the hidden homeless. Hidden homelessness are citizens who live temporarily with others but without guarantee of continued residency or immediate prospects for accessing permanent housing. This describes people staying with relatives, friends, neighbors, or strangers because they have no other option. Chief among the factors driving the looming homelessness catastrophe is the skyrocketing cost of living, which has left millions of Canadians struggling to keep a roof over their heads in the face of stagnant wages and rising prices. According to a recent report by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Canada's major cities has increased by 20% over the past 3 years, far outpacing inflation and wage growth. In Toronto, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment now stands at a staggering $2,280 per month, while in Vancouver it has soared to $2,240. For low-income Canadians and those living on fixed incomes, these costs are simply unsustainable. A 2023 study from the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives found that the hourly wage for a 40-hour work week that is needed to afford rent in every province far exceeds the minimum wage. A minimum wage worker in Ontario would need to work 79 hours per week just to afford the average one-bedroom apartment in Toronto, leaving little money for food, healthcare, or other basic necessities. And for those on social assistance or disability benefits, the situation is even more dire, with shelter allowances that fall far short of the actual cost of housing in most Canadian cities. Deteriorating housing affordability following the onset of the pandemic, combined with higher unemployment and fewer job vacancies, vacancies in recent months, along with a surge in inflation throughout 2021 and 2022, has led to higher costs for essential goods and services. These factors continue to place financial pressures on many households across Canada. In the fall of 2022, almost half, or 44%, of Canadians were very concerned with their household's ability to afford housing or rent. So it comes as no surprise that the most reported reason leading to homelessness was financial issues at 41.8%. Compounding the problem is the growing influx of refugees seeking asylum in Canada, many of whom are fleeing climate disasters, conflict, and persecution in their home countries. According to Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, the number of asylum seekers entering Canada has risen sharply in recent years, from just over 16,000 in 2015 to more than 64,000 in 2019. While Canada has a proud history of providing safe haven for those fleeing persecution and conflict, the rapid increase in the number of refugee claimants has put unprecedented strain on the country's housing and social support systems. Many refugees and asylum seekers arrive in Canada with little more than the clothes on their backs, having fled their homes and communities with little time to plan or prepare. Upon arrival, they often face significant barriers in accessing safe and affordable housing. As a result, many refugees and asylum seekers find themselves in precarious housing situations, such as overcrowded apartments, shelters, or even on the streets. Another major driver of homelessness in Canada is the ongoing opioid epidemic, which has claimed the lives of over 23,000 Canadians between 2016 and 2021 and has left countless others struggling with addiction and mental illness. According to a report by the Canadian Institute for Health Information, opioid-related hospitalizations have increased by 27% over the past 5 years, with rates highest among those aged 25 to 44. For many of these individuals, homelessness is both a cause and a consequence of their addiction. Substance abuse can lead to job loss, financial instability, and the breakdown of social support networks, all of which can contribute to homelessness. And once on the streets, the daily struggle to find shelter, food, and medical care can make it even harder to break free from the cycle of addiction. But while the human cost of homelessness is staggering, so too is the financial cost to Canadian society as a whole. The State of Homelessness reports homelessness is estimated to cost around $7 billion per year to the Canadian economy. This includes emergency shelters and community support, as well as the increased costs of healthcare, the criminal justice system, and emergency services. That works out to an average cost of $53,144 per homeless person per year, a figure that is more than double the cost of providing affordable housing and support services. To break that down further, the At-Home Chez Soi study by the Mental Health Commission of Canada found that the average annual cost per person for those who are homeless and living with mental illness were $56,431 for institutional care, for example, psychiatric hospitals, general hospitals, or prisons, $13,339 for emergency shelters, $1,628 for supportive and transitional housing, and $1,866 for affordable housing with supports. In contrast, the annual cost for affordable housing with support ranged from $13,000 to $18,000 per person, a fraction of the costs associated with homelessness. So what does this mean for the average Canadian taxpayer? While it's difficult to pinpoint an exact figure, as the costs of homelessness are borne by all levels of government and various agencies, a rough estimate suggests that the average Canadian household contributes approximately $160 per year to the costs of homelessness through their taxes. But those costs are only going to rise in the years to come as the number of homeless Canadians continues to grow. By 2030, the total annual cost of homelessness could reach around $16 billion, placing an even more significant strain on already overstretched public resources. This is not just a crisis for those experiencing homelessness, it is a crisis for every Canadian taxpayer who is footing the bill for a system that is failing to address the root causes of the problem. So what can be done to stem the tide of homelessness and prevent this looming catastrophe from becoming a reality? The answers are complex and will require a sustained effort from all levels of government, as well as from the private sector and civil society as a whole. One key priority must be to increase the supply of affordable housing, particularly in Canada's major cities, where the cost of living is highest. This will require a significant investment in new construction and renovation, as well as changes to zoning and land use policies to encourage the development of more high-density, mixed-income housing. The federal government's National Housing Strategy, launched in 2017, is a step in the right direction, with a goal of reducing chronic homelessness by 50% by 2027 to 2028. However, much more needs to be done to address the scale of the problem. Another critical step is to strengthen Canada's social safety net, particularly for those who are most vulnerable to homelessness. This could include increasing social assistance rates to reflect the actual cost of living, expanding access to mental health and addiction services, and providing more support for those transitioning out of the criminal justice system or the child welfare system. The recently announced Canada-wide Early Learning and Childcare Agreement, which aims to reduce childcare fees to an average of $10 per day by 2025 to 2026, is a positive development that could help alleviate financial pressures on low-income families. Addressing the opioid crisis must also be a top priority, with a focus on harm reduction, treatment, and support services for those struggling with addiction. The federal government has taken some steps in this direction, such as increasing access to naloxone kits and supervised consumption sites, but much more needs to be done to address the root causes of addiction and provide long-term support for those in recovery. But perhaps most importantly, addressing homelessness will require a fundamental shift in the way that Canadians think about poverty, inequality, and the right to housing. For too long, homelessness has been seen as a personal failing or a sign of moral weakness, rather than a systemic failure of a society that has prioritized profit over people. To truly end homelessness, Canadians must recognize that access to safe, affordable housing is a basic human right, and that no one should be forced to sleep on the streets or in emergency shelters, simply because they cannot afford the cost of rent. This will require a renewed commitment to social justice and equality, and a willingness to challenge the deep-seated inequalities that have allowed homelessness to flourish in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. It will require a recognition that the costs of homelessness, both human and financial, are simply too high to ignore, and that investing in solutions is not only the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do. Ultimately, ending homelessness in Canada will require a collaborative effort from all sectors of society, government, business, nonprofits, and individuals alike. It will require innovative thinking, bold action, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. Most of all, it will require a commitment to the idea that every human deserves a safe and stable place to call home, and that no one should be left behind in pursuing a better life. The evidence is clear. Investing in proven solutions to homelessness, such as affordable housing and supportive services, is not only the right thing to do from a moral perspective, it is also the smart thing to do from an economic perspective. Ironically, it costs more to ignore housing problems than it would to fix them. Consider the estimate that homelessness alone costs the Canadian economy over $7 billion annually, while the Government of Canada invests $119 million annually to address homelessness through the Homelessness Partnering Strategy. Provinces and municipalities also invest. This is insufficient to address the problem, and as a result, has not led to a noticeable reduction in homelessness. By not investing adequately in housing for the poorest Canadians, healthcare, justice, and other taxpayer-funded costs increase. By taking bold, assertive actions now to address the root causes of homelessness, the Canadian government can not only improve the lives of countless individuals and families, but also build a stronger, more prosperous Canada for all. Ultimately, the solution to homelessness lies not just in the hands of governments and service providers, but in the hearts and minds of every Canadian, who must all recognize that homelessness is not an inevitability, but a solvable problem, one that requires collective will, compassion, and commitment to build a more just and equitable society for all. If you like this video, hit the like button and help us spread the word. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications on our latest news and analysis. In the meantime, check out one of these videos here to learn more. Thanks for watching.